Ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to talk about a powerful yet often misunderstood process that many of us face on our journey to greatness: isolation. We all have experienced seasons of feeling alone, disconnected, or even abandoned. But what if I told you that these moments aren't meant to break you, but rather to build you? What if I told you that God uses isolation as a tool to prepare you for the blessings you are destined to receive? There is a divine purpose in every moment of solitude. And today I want to help you understand that purpose. I want to shed light on why isolation is not your punishment. It is your preparation. Isolation cultivates intimacy with God. When we think of isolation, it's easy to see it as a punishment or something to fear. But the truth is, isolation often serves as the greatest gift we can receive in our spiritual journeys. In today's world, we are constantly surrounded by noise, phones ringing, social media buzzing, people needing our attention. All of this can drown out the one voice that we need to hear most, the voice of God. It's in moments of isolation that we are drawn closer to God. This isn't just about physical separation from the crowd, but more importantly, it's about creating space for God to speak to us, to pour wisdom into our hearts. Have you ever felt like there was so much noise around you that it was hard to hear God? It's in isolation that He calls us to quiet ourselves, to set aside distractions and focus solely on Him. Take a moment and think about the story of Elijah. He was a mighty prophet, but even he found himself in a time of despair. He ran for his life, fleeing from Queen Jezebel, and found himself alone in a cave. At that moment, Elijah could have been consumed by his fears, overwhelmed by his circumstances, but instead, God used that time to show him something powerful. God sent a mighty wind followed by an earthquake and a fire. But he was not in any of those. Instead, after all the chaos, Elijah heard the still, small voice of God. In that moment, God gave him direction, strength, and purpose, not in the loud and dramatic, but in the quiet of the cave. In our own lives, when we experience isolation, it's not meant to be a punishment. It's God's invitation to hear His voice more clearly. God is calling us away from the chaos of the world to the calm of His presence. This is where true transformation happens. When we take the time to step back from everything, we can hear His whispers, His guidance for the next steps in our journey. Sometimes the blessing isn't just in the destination, but in the intimacy that isolation fosters between us and God. That intimacy leads to deeper trust. In that quiet place, God reveals Himself to us in ways we never would have known amidst the distractions of life. If you're in a season of isolation, know that it's a moment to cultivate a closeness to God that could not come in the busyness of the world. Just like a plant needs time and space to grow, so do you. This season is not wasted time. It's the best preparation for the blessing that God has in store for you. Isolation is not just a physical experience. It is an opportunity for internal work, a time to reflect and refine. In our everyday lives, we often move from one task to the next without truly considering the state of our hearts, our thoughts, or our actions. But isolation provides the necessary space to reflect on the person we are becoming. When life slows down, we are able to take an honest look at who we are, where we've been, and where we need to go. Sometimes we have to face uncomfortable truths about ourselves, truths that we would have otherwise ignored in the hustle of daily life. Isolation is God's tool for pruning, removing the unhealthy, the unnecessary, the toxic from our lives so that we can be refined, sharpened, and made ready for the blessings ahead. Think about the process of refining gold. Gold doesn't shine by accident. It has to go through intense heat to remove the impurities. In the same way, God uses isolation to refine our character. When we face moments of loneliness or silence, it's as if God is placing us in the fire. The fire may feel uncomfortable, even painful at times, but it's in this refining process that we become stronger and more prepared for what He has in store. The heat removes the imperfections and leaves behind something pure and valuable. Take the example of Jacob. Before God changed his name to Israel and gave him the blessing of a nation, Jacob was alone, wrestling with an angel through the night. He was exhausted, struggling, and vulnerable. But in that moment of isolation, Jacob was forced to confront his identity, his past, and his flaws. He wrestled not only with the angel, but with his own insecurities, fears, and weaknesses. And when the wrestling was over, God touched his hip, leaving him with a permanent reminder of that night. Jacob was forever changed. Sometimes we too have to wrestle with our own issues in isolation. It's not easy and it's not always comfortable, but it is necessary. When we are removed from the distractions of life, we are able to face our own internal struggles. In this space, God refines us. He helps us confront our fears, heal from past hurts, and let go of old patterns that keep us stuck. He does this not to harm us, but to prepare us for something greater. This time of reflection also allows us to grow in wisdom. When we are isolated, we are less distracted by the voices of others, and we can better hear the voice of God guiding us. God's guidance in these moments is like a gentle compass, leading us away from the things that don't serve us and toward the path of our calling. Isolation helps us become more self-aware and spiritually discerning. We begin to understand who we are at the core, our true identity, and the purpose for which we were created. In moments of isolation, ask yourself, what am I learning about myself right now? It might be a difficult question, but it's also one of the most important. The process of refinement doesn't always feel good, but it always leads to growth. It's like a seed in the dark soil. It may seem like nothing is happening, but beneath the surface, change is taking place. Roots are growing deep, preparing the plant for the light of day. Isolation is a place where God works on us deeply. It's where He can teach us humility, patience, and trust. It's where He can heal wounds, correct wrong thinking, and realign our hearts with His. And when we come out of that isolation, we are not the same as we were before. We are stronger, wiser, and more equipped to handle the blessings that will come our way. Isolation is a place where our true strength is often forged. It is in these quiet, sometimes lonely seasons that we discover just how strong we really are, how resilient our spirits can be when faced with adversity. When life is smooth, when everything is going according to plan, it's easy to think we've got it all together. But isolation has a way of revealing our weaknesses and our limits. It's when we're isolated, when everything around us seems uncertain, that our faith is tested. The beautiful thing about this testing is that it forces us to rely on God in ways we never would have done otherwise. Imagine a piece of iron being placed into the fire. The heat is intense. The pressure is almost unbearable. But through the fire, the iron becomes steel, stronger, more durable. It doesn't happen by chance. It happens through pressure, through fire. Our strength works in much the same way. God uses isolation to build our resilience. We may not recognize it at the moment, but He is strengthening our spiritual muscles. In these seasons, we are forced to confront our fears, our doubts, and our limitations. And as we face them, we begin to realize that we are not alone. God is right there with us, providing the strength and endurance we need to press forward. It's in the moments when we feel like we can't go any further that we find the deepest wells of strength within us, strength that we never knew we had. Think about the experience of David. Before he became king, David spent years in the wilderness, running for his life from King Saul. Those years weren't just about physical survival. They were about building resilience. David had to fight lions and bears to protect his sheep. But more than that, he had to learn how to trust in God when everything around him seemed dark. David's isolation taught him to lean not on his own understanding, but to trust God for strength and guidance. His ability to face giants like Goliath came from the resilience he built during those years in hiding. It's not just physical battles that we face in isolation. It's the emotional, mental, and spiritual ones. We deal with feelings of abandonment, rejection, and uncertainty. But when we emerge from these times, we are not the same person who went in. We are stronger, more resilient, and more capable of handling what lies ahead. The things that once seemed impossible now feel within reach because we've already fought battles that others may not even see. There is an important truth in this process. You can't build resilience without resistance. Just like muscles grow stronger through consistent effort and strain, your spiritual resilience grows when you are tested. These moments may feel overwhelming, but they are preparing you for the bigger challenges and the bigger victories ahead. As you lean into God's strength, your own strength will multiply, and you will emerge from the fire as a person who is unshakable, ready for the next stage of your journey. Isolation, while challenging, also prepares us for the blessings that are yet to come. This preparation is not just about personal growth, it's about creating the capacity to handle the greatness God has in store for us. We often think of blessings as immediate, visible rewards. But God's blessings are rarely given without a time of preparation. Imagine a farmer who plants seeds in a field. For the seeds to grow and produce a rich harvest, the soil must be prepared. It must be cultivated, watered, and tended to. If the ground is not properly prepared, the harvest will not be abundant. In the same way, isolation is part of the process of preparing us to receive the blessings that God has promised. God does not give us blessings before we are ready to handle them. If He were to give us success, wealth, or influence before our hearts, minds, and spirits are ready, we could easily lose those blessings. God, in His wisdom, understands this. That's why He takes us through seasons of isolation to prepare us, not just for the blessings themselves, but for the responsibility and the stewardship that comes with them. Consider the story of Joseph. Joseph was given a vision as a young boy. He saw himself as a leader in a place of power. But before he could walk into that vision, he had to be prepared. He was sold into slavery, thrown into prison, and rejected by his own family. During these years, Joseph faced isolation, and it was in this period that he was shaped. His character was refined, his leadership skills honed, and his faith strengthened. When the time came for Joseph to step into the role of second in command in Egypt, he was not only physically prepared, but emotionally and spiritually prepared for the weight of that responsibility. Joseph's story teaches us that God doesn't just prepare us for the blessings. We are also being prepared for the impact that those blessings will have on the world around us. The more God blesses us, the more people He places in our path who will be impacted by what He's done in our lives. Our ability to handle those blessings requires us to grow in maturity, in character, and in wisdom. There is a cost to the blessing, but there is also a reward. God knows that if He were to give us the desires of our hearts too soon, we might squander them. But in isolation, He is teaching us how to handle the weight of His promises. He's making sure that when the doors of opportunity open, we can walk through them with confidence, knowing that we are equipped to handle what lies ahead. Isolation also helps us to understand that our blessings are not just for our benefit. In the process of being prepared, God often opens our eyes to the bigger picture. He shows us that the success we are working towards is not just about us. It's about being a blessing to others. God is refining us so that when we receive the blessings, we will use them to bless others, to serve, to make an impact that extends far beyond ourselves. So when you find yourself in a season of isolation, do not despair. Do not feel forgotten or abandoned. You are being prepared for something great, something beyond your current understanding. The blessings you are about to receive are tied to your growth, to your resilience, and to your willingness to trust the process. God is equipping you for what lies ahead, and when the time is right, He will release the fullness of His blessings into your life. The wait, the isolation, the testing, they are all part of the preparation for something bigger than you could have ever imagined. In moments of isolation, it's easy to feel as though we've been forgotten, as though we're missing out on what others are experiencing. But the truth is, isolation is not a setback, it's a setup. It is God's divine way of preparing us for what He has planned. While it may feel like a season of loneliness or uncertainty, it's actually a season of growth, refinement, and strengthening. God is doing something in you that will be revealed in due time. Through isolation, He draws us closer to Himself, creating a deeper intimacy where we can hear His voice clearly. It's in these quiet moments that we are refined, our weaknesses are exposed, and our resilience is built. Every step of the journey in isolation is preparing us not only for personal transformation, but for the greater blessings that are to come. And when those blessings arrive, we will be ready, equipped, and stronger than ever before. So embrace the season you are in. Don't rush through it. Trust that God is at work in your life, even in the moments when you feel alone or uncertain. The isolation you may feel is not the end. It's the beginning of something extraordinary. When you come out on the other side, you will not only be prepared to receive the blessings He has for you, but you will also have the strength, the wisdom, and the heart to handle them with grace. Remember, God does not waste any season. If you find yourself in isolation today, know that you are being prepared for something greater than you could have ever imagined. The blessing is coming, and it is worth the wait.